Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. If you're new here, consider subscribing. It really helps keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now, sit back, relax, and let's get into the story. The day it all started, I was stationed near Nogales, Arizona, patrolling a stretch of the US-Mexico border I'd driven 1,000 times before. I was on shift with my partner, Miguel Ramirez, a 10-year veteran like myself. We were both part of U.S. Customs and Border Protection, assigned to the Tucson sector. That morning felt no different from any other. Dry, hot, the wind rolling in dust from the Sonoran Desert. We were in a green and white CBP Tahoe, outfitted with a standard set of equipment, M4 carbine secured between the seats, tactical gear in the back, and the radio squawking updates from other agents in the area. Miguel was driving, sipping gas station coffee and watching the horizon through Oakley shades. It was 6:38 a.m. when the first unusual call came in over the radio. Dispatch to all units. Be advised, we have a report of a group of individuals behaving erratically near mile marker 12. Possible dehydration or narcotics. Medical requested. Proceed with caution. Miguel raised an eyebrow. Mile marker 12? That's in our sector. I nodded and keyed up the radio. Unit 237 responding. ETA 8 minutes. The area they mentioned was isolated, miles from any road, let alone a town. The desert out there is merciless. Low shrubs, rocky hills, and not a single drop of shade. People crossing the border often underestimate it. Every summer, we found remains. We reached the area in just under 10 minutes, kicking up a trail of dust as the Tahoe rolled off-road. I scanned ahead with binoculars, spotting 3 figures stumbling in the distance, about 300 meters out. They weren't dressed for the terrain. One wore a torn white shirt, the other a jacket despite the heat. The third was dragging a leg unnaturally, the limb bent at a bad angle. Could be injured, Miguel said, pulling the vehicle to a stop. Let's approach on foot. I grabbed my service pistol, an HKP 2000 and .40 S&W, and stepped out into the heat. Miguel unslung his M4 and kept it low just in case. We walked toward the figures, calling out in both English and Spanish. Alto, United States Border Patrol, stop and identify yourselves. They didn't stop. If anything, they turned toward us and started moving faster, limping but closing the distance with an unnatural urgency. That's when I realized something wasn't right. Their eyes, vacant, cloudy, faces slack like the muscles were no longer working right. Back up, I said quickly, raising my pistol. Something's wrong. Miguel didn't hesitate. He shouldered his rifle and repeated the command. They kept coming, then one of them, a man with a missing lower jaw, sprinted. That thing ran straight for Miguel. He opened fire. 3 controlled bursts to the center mass. The man dropped, but within seconds, he started getting back up. What the? Miguel took a step back. I fired 2 shots. One hit the creature's chest, the other struck its head just above the eyebrow. It dropped for good this time. The other 2 didn't even react. They didn't flinch, didn't run, just came faster. Headshots, I muttered. Aim for the head. Miguel nodded and adjusted. He fired again, this time a precise shot through the temple. The second figure collapsed. The third kept crawling. I emptied 2 rounds into its skull and it stopped moving. We stood in stunned silence, the smell of spent brass and blood heavy in the air. I could still hear the echo of our shots rolling over the hills. Miguel called it in. Dispatch, this is Unit 237. We've encountered something abnormal. 3 suspects down, multiple gunshot wounds. They were unresponsive to commands and exhibited violent behavior. Requesting backup and medical immediately. There was a pause. Unit 237. Please repeat last. Did you say multiple suspects were unresponsive and required lethal force? Miguel looked at me. Affirmative. They kept coming after being shot. Requesting confirmation on medical and hazmat support. Something isn't right. Another pause. Copy that. Hold position. We're rerouting air and marine operations for aerial recon. Secure the area. We didn't need recon. Whatever this was, it wasn't some drug-fueled rage or border crossing gone wrong. I'd seen plenty of both. This was something else. 15 minutes later, while we were securing the area, another call came in. Unit 263 to dispatch. We've got a situation at the pedestrian crossing at Morley Gate. Crowd control failing. People are attacking customs officers. We need immediate response. The line cut off into static. My blood went cold. Morley Gate was in downtown Nogales, at the official port of entry. That meant whatever this was, it had spread to the city. Miguel and I exchanged a look. No words were needed. We knew we had to get back to base. We loaded up fast and began the drive back. I pulled out my phone. No signal. That was odd, even in these parts. Miguel tried the onboard radio again. Nothing. EMP? He asked. Or intentional jamming? Could be, but if this is happening in multiple places. Our CBP station was about 25 minutes away in Nogales. When we arrived, the front gate was open. Alarming. The station is usually tight, with badge-controlled access and surveillance cameras. We pulled in slowly. The parking lot had several abandoned vehicles, doors open, one of them still running. No signs of life. Check the building, I said, stepping out, M4 in hand. We moved in 2x2 formation, clearing the hallway. Desks were overturned. Blood streaked the floor in places. A boot print trailed through it. We found Agent Hall slumped near the evidence locker. A massive gash across his neck. His sidearm was still holstered. Didn't even have time to draw, Miguel whispered. Gunfire rang out, close. We sprinted toward the comms room. Inside, we found 2 agents, Mendoza and Ellis, barricaded behind a flipped conference table. "Ramirez, Cole!" Mendoza shouted. "You're alive!" "Just got back," I said. "What happened?" Mendoza's hands were shaking as she reloaded her sidearm. They came through the front. Thompson let someone in, said they were injured. Within seconds, that guy attacked, bit him. Then more showed up, like it was coordinated. Ellis pointed at the console. "Comms are fried. We can't raise headquarters. Nothing's going out." I looked around the room. Papers scattered. Monitors flashing red warnings. It looked like a war zone. "All right," I said. "We need to assume this is bigger than just us. Headshots work. Center mass doesn't." Miguel nodded. "Ammo?" Ellis tossed us 2 spare magazines. Low, but enough for now. We gathered what we could. Rifles, pistols, tactical vests, bottled water, MREs. Then we made a plan to sweep the building, secure it floor by floor. We made it halfway through the 2nd floor when we heard movement below. Heavy footsteps, wet breathing. Whatever it wasn't friendly. They'd come back. We set up a choke point at the stairwell, 4 of us, one direction. Clear lines of fire. I remember the moment they appeared, shuffling, moaning, dragging twisted limbs. Former agents, civilians, maybe even detainees. All turned into these things. We opened fire, controlled, coordinated. For every one that dropped, another appeared. I kept count. 7 down, then 10, then 15. By the time the last one fell, Mendoza had a bite on her forearm. She didn't even realize it at first. Miguel was already wrapping her wound, but I saw the look in his eyes. We all knew. Ellis said it first. We've got maybe minutes before she turns. I'm not going out like that, Mendoza said through gritted teeth. You get out of here. Take the backup vehicle. I'll stay, hold this position. No way, Miguel said. We're not. She's right, I interrupted. If this spreads, containment will be the only way. We have to move. Someone has to get the word out. There was a long silence before Ellis finally nodded. Mendoza gave us a final look. Calm, resolute. She was a warrior to the end. We left her with a rifle and a full mag. By 9:45 a.m., we were driving north out of Nogales in a CBP truck, passing burning cars and broken signs. The outbreak had reached the town's heart. We could see plumes of smoke rising from the direction of the hospital and the Walmart supercenter on Mariposa Road. Ellis stayed quiet in the back seat, clutching his rifle with white knuckles, eyes darting with every passing shadow. Miguel kept his eyes on the road while I scanned the surrounding hills with binoculars, half expecting to see helicopters or military vehicles moving in, but there was nothing. Just the eerie silence that creeps in after something terrible has happened and no one is left to sound the alarm. We took Highway 82 east, heading for the ranch Miguel had mentioned. He said it belonged to a friend, Noah Caldwell, former Army cavalry scout who retired early and built a home deep in the hills past Patagonia. Noah had been off-grid for years, living on solar power and rainwater collection, but Miguel stayed in touch with him through encrypted ham radio. Said the man was a survivalist, the real kind, not the tinfoil hat type, but someone who'd trained soldiers on reconnaissance, fieldcraft, and evasive movement. If anyone could weather something like this, it was him. As we passed through the edge of Sonoita, the landscape grew quiet. No cars on the road, no voices, no movement. A local diner had its front window shattered, and a truck sat idling outside with the driver's door open. Blood streaks led from the cab to the building's entrance, but there were no bodies, just signs of a struggle and the unmistakable silence of abandonment. The only sounds were the occasional bird call and the wind brushing the brittle grass. Looks like they didn't even get a warning, I muttered, mostly to myself. No time to react, Miguel said. Same thing happened in Nogales. It moved faster than any outbreak I've ever seen or trained for. Ellis finally spoke, his voice low. This wasn't just a virus. I saw Thompson's eyes before he turned. It was like something shut off in his brain, like he was already gone before the body changed. None of us had the right words. We'd read briefings on bioterrorism, pandemic response, and mass casualty events, but none of that training applied to what we'd seen. Our only clear rule now was simple. Headshots worked, everything else didn't. And whatever this was, it wasn't just killing people, it was replacing them. We reached the turnoff for Caldwell's ranch a little after 10:30 a.m. The gravel path wound through mesquite-covered hills, bordered by an old barbed wire fence. At the gate stood a rusted "No Trespassing" sign riddled with bullet holes. Miguel leaned out the window and triggered the horn. 3 short blasts, then 2 long ones. A moment passed, and then a camera on a swiveling mount above the gate shifted toward us. A voice crackled through a speaker mounted to the post. "Who's with you?" "It's Miguel," he said. "Cole and Ellis. CBP, situation's gone sideways." The gate buzzed and began to open. The ranch sat nestled in a basin, protected by surrounding hills and tall ocotillo plants. There were 2 main buildings, a long, low house with a tin roof and a separate garage with an old satellite dish mounted on top. Caldwell stepped out of the house, wearing a worn tactical vest over a flannel shirt, holding a scoped bolt-action rifle. He looked us over with a hardened expression before nodding and gesturing us inside. We spent the next half hour giving him the full rundown. The attack near the border, the station being overrun, Mendoza's last stand, and the city falling into chaos. Caldwell listened without interruption, occasionally nodding but not surprised. He had a map spread out across the kitchen table, tracking radio towers, repeater stations, and military installations throughout southern Arizona. Most of them had already gone dark. EMP, sabotage, or systemic collapse, he said finally. Doesn't matter, you're right. This isn't random. And if it's in Nogales and Tucson, it'll hit Phoenix by nightfall. Maybe it already has. Any word from your contacts? Miguel asked. Caldwell shook his head. Last ham transmission I got was from a guy near Fort Huachuca. Said the base was sealed. After that, static. Either they're containing it or they've gone silent. We took stock of supplies. Water from a rain catchment system. Enough canned goods for a month. Ammo stored in metal crates in the basement. Caldwell had weapons for every scenario. 308 hunting rifles, 5.56 AR-15s, 9mm pistols, even a few 12-gauge shotguns. Nothing fancy, just what worked. He offered us each a better loadout. I swapped out my HK for a Glock 19 and took an AR with an ACOG scope and sling. Miguel kept his M4, and Ellis picked a Remington 870 pump action with a side saddle loaded with .00 buck. By 11:20 a.m., we were on overwatch duty from the rooftop. From there, we could see across the valley floor. Still no movement, no smoke. Just the calm before the next storm. Miguel passed out water bottles and we rotated shifts, watching every ridge and trail. That stillness broke at 12:04 p.m. Ellis was the first to spot them. 2 figures moving through the ravine below, about 600 yards out. At first, they seemed normal. Backpacks, walking sticks, civilian clothing. But then one of them stumbled and didn't break stride. The leg twisted sideways, and it kept walking like nothing was wrong. The second figure had no pack, just a blood-smeared shirt and missing scalp. Visual confirmation, I said, lining them up in my scope. 2 infected. Confirmed behavior pattern, disoriented gait, unreactive, visible trauma. Range? Caldwell asked, already loading a fresh round. 600 yards, coming slow, we've got time. No, Caldwell said, they're scouts. They'll bring more. He fired, the point. 308 cracked like thunder. The first one's head snapped back and it crumpled to the ground. The second turned slightly, then resumed walking. Second shot, another clean headshot, down. We waited 5 minutes, then 10. Then, just before 12:30, they came. At least 20 of them emerged from the tree line below, pouring out like ants. Some were fast, others limped. But all of them came straight for the ranch with one goal. We raised rifles and opened fire. The noise was deafening. The echoes of gunfire rolled across the hills. My scope danced between targets as I dropped one after another, aiming high and fast. Miguel knelt beside me with a steady rhythm. 3-round bursts, surgical. Ellis stood just behind with the shotgun, guarding the stairs. Caldwell moved with precision. Every round he fired a kill shot. They kept coming. 10 minutes passed, ammo burned, shells piled up. The infected crossed the bottom of the ravine and began ascending the hill. Reloading, I shouted, ducking behind the rooftop barrier. Coming up the fence line, Miguel called out. Ellis fired twice. The boom of the shotgun rattled the windows. Then we heard the sound of breaking glass downstairs. They got inside, Caldwell growled. Basement access. Old crawl space behind the garage. We moved fast. Caldwell took point, leading us through the side door. One of the infected had slipped through a rusted grate beneath the outer wall. Caldwell dispatched it with a knife to the base of the skull. We sealed the gap and began clearing the lower rooms. The fight was closer now. Faces we didn't recognize snarling from the shadows. We pushed them back room by room, stacking bodies as we went. I kept thinking about Mendoza, how she'd stayed behind so we could survive, and now here we were, backs against the wall again. By 1:15 p.m., the last one was down. We took a head count, no one bit, no injuries. But the house was breached, that meant we were vulnerable. "We won't hold another wave," Caldwell said. "They know we're here now." "So, what's the plan?" Miguel asked, wiping sweat from his brow. "Evacuate. Take only what we can carry. Head north." "North to where?" "Davis Monthan Air Force Base. If it's still up, they'll have evac protocols. Fallback locations. Maybe answers." I didn't like the odds, but staying meant waiting for death. At least if we moved, we had a chance. We spent the next hour packing gear, ammunition, food, radios, maps. Caldwell handed me a printed sheet marked with possible safe zones, airfields, National Guard depots, armories. By 2:30 p.m., we loaded up into 2 vehicles. Caldwell's old diesel-powered F-250 and our CBP truck, and rolled out, tires crunching over shell casings and broken glass. The ranch shrank in the mirror behind us, just another place we couldn't stay. The world wasn't what it had been that morning. Cities were falling. Communications were down. The infected were spreading fast. There were no news reports, no instructions, no one telling us what came next. It was just the 4 of us, armed and uncertain, trying to make it through the next hour. We took Highway 83 north towards Tucson, sticking to the back roads as much as we could. Caldwell had rigged a handheld radio to scan for military transmissions, but the airwaves were dead. Just static, broken occasionally by garbled messages or sharp bursts of tone that hinted at encrypted chatter. Whatever official response there'd been was scattered or silenced. I kept thinking that maybe, just maybe, Davis Monthan was still standing, that someone up there had answers, orders, a plan. But the farther we drove, the more that hope started to feel naive. The roads were surprisingly empty. No lines of evacuees, no gridlock. That should have been a good sign, but it wasn't. It meant people hadn't had time to flee. Whatever hit Nogales probably swept through Tucson the same way, fast, brutal, and without warning. We passed the remnants of what looked like a National Guard checkpoint near Vail. 2 Humvees left abandoned on the shoulder, one flipped on its side and scorched, the other riddled with what looked like small arms fire. Dozens of shell casings glittered in the gravel. Bloodstains marked the pavement. There were no bodies, just signs of violence and something worse. Drag marks leading away from the vehicles and into the desert. Ellis didn't speak at all anymore. He stared out the passenger window, breathing through his mouth like the air was too thick to swallow. I didn't blame him. We'd all seen death before. Working the southern border meant that was part of the job. But this was something else. This wasn't desperation. It was extinction, marching in daylight. We stopped outside of Corona de Tucson at a gas station that looked intact. The place had the usual barred windows and broken ice machine out front, but no signs of struggle. Caldwell and I went in first, rifles up. The power was out, and the air smelled stale. Nothing moved. There were no people inside, just a half-eaten burrito sitting on the counter, still in its wrapper, and a radio on a back shelf cycling through dead air. We swept the aisles and storeroom, confirmed it was clear, and motioned for the others to come in. We scavenged what we could: bottled water, canned soup, protein bars, a couple of dusty medical kits. Miguel found a solar charger behind the counter and shoved it in his pack. I grabbed a pack of road maps and some bandanas. Seemed small, but even that could be useful if the dust storms came early. There was a quiet reverence in the way we moved through the aisles, like looters picking through a church after the world had ended. No one said it, but we all felt it. This wasn't a pit stop. This was how we lived now. Back on the road, we kept close to the edge of the city. Caldwell took point in the F-250, leading us through industrial zones and quiet streets lined with shuttered warehouses. The highway signs still pointed toward the base, but none of us trusted the main roads anymore. We came up behind a school bus jackknifed across an overpass. The driver's side door hung open. The interior was soaked red, and claw marks were etched into the walls. Dozens of small backpacks were still strewn across the seats, untouched. Miguel climbed out to check for supplies but was back within seconds, his face hard and unreadable. We didn't ask. By 3:40 p.m., we reached the southern edge of Tucson proper. The city had fallen quiet in that unnatural way we'd come to recognize. No traffic, no sirens, no people. Fires burned in the distance, and a dark plume of smoke rose somewhere near the University Medical Center. From the rooftop of an abandoned strip mall, we got a glimpse of the Davis-Monthan perimeter. The fence line was still up. We saw movement, vehicles, figures, but it was hard to tell from this far whether they were friendly. It could have been survivors, or it could have been something worse. We debated our approach. Caldwell didn't trust the main gate. He pointed out that if protocol had failed, the infected might have gotten inside already. I agreed. I'd worked with base security before. Their response time was good, but even the best trained teams could be overwhelmed if the outbreak spread internally. Miguel suggested we try the West Service Access, an old maintenance road that cut through a utility zone and linked up with the airfield's hangar line. It wasn't ideal, but it might let us see what was going on inside without driving straight into a potential massacre. We moved on foot the last mile, taking alleyways and fence lines, rifles ready. We didn't encounter any infected, which felt wrong. Tucson should have been crawling by now. We reached the perimeter fence near the West Service Road and saw the breach immediately. A large section of chain link had been cut open, probably with bolt cutters or explosives. There were tire marks in the dirt, footprints in every direction, and a trail of blood leading away from the gap. Caldwell signaled for silence. We moved in, following the blood trail and keeping low. The air was dry, buzzing with flies. Then we saw them. 3 bodies slumped against a hangar wall. 2 wore airman fatigues. The third was in civilian clothing, arms wrapped in bandages soaked through with red. None of them moved. We approached cautiously, checking for signs of life, but it was clear. They were dead. Not turned. Just dead, shot in the head. Execution style. That changed things. Inside the hangar, we found signs of a recent firefight. Brass casings littered the concrete floor. A Humvee was parked sideways across the entryway, front windows blown out. Blood was splattered across the far wall. Something had gone wrong here. Maybe survivors trying to take shelter, maybe soldiers trying to hold the line. But either way, it had ended badly. Then we heard it, a low thumping sound in the distance. Faint, rhythmic. A helicopter. We rushed outside, climbed to the roof of the hangar, and spotted it. An old Black Hawk, banking hard as it rose over the far side of the base and headed northwest. We waved, shouted, even fired a flare we'd taken from the truck, but it didn't turn. Either they didn't see us, or they didn't care. Ellis collapsed to his knees, hands gripping his helmet. Miguel stared after the chopper, jaw tight. "They're pulling out." "No," Caldwell said. "They're regrouping. This isn't evac, it's retreat." The implications hit hard. If the military was abandoning its own air bases, then containment had failed completely. There was no perimeter anymore, no quarantine. The infection had passed the point of control, and now it was about survival. We regrouped and made a choice. We'd raid the base's motor pool for fuel and supplies, then head north again, past the city toward Mount Lemon. Caldwell knew of an old emergency repeater station up there, run off its own solar grid. If it was still online, we could send a broad-range distress signal, maybe reach someone still fighting. We moved fast. The longer we stayed inside Davis-Monthan, the higher the risk. The hangars were eerily quiet, lit only by the red-orange light of the low sun cutting through broken windows. Somewhere, deeper in the base, automatic gunfire echoed once, then stopped. That sound used to mean control. Now, it just meant someone was still losing a fight. The motor pool was half a mile west of the airfield. A cluster of garages and repair bays, surrounded by a chain-link fence and guarded, normally, by a pair of MPs. We found no guards now, just an open gate, a tipped-over guard shack, and a fuel tanker parked awkwardly across the yard. One of the bays was still open. Inside, a Humvee sat with the hood up and tools scattered across the floor like the mechanics had just vanished mid-service. There was a fire extinguisher left in the passenger seat. No signs of struggle, just absence. Ellis and Miguel siphoned diesel while Caldwell and I checked the other vehicles. Most of them were dead or had flat tires. We found 1M, 1151 in decent condition, already half-loaded with crates of MREs and cold weather gear. The keys were still in the ignition. It was like someone had prepped it to leave and never made it back. While Caldwell refitted the vehicle for travel, I found a communications locker inside the dispatch office. The door had been forced open, probably looted for gear. Most of the radios were gone, but tucked in a padded case behind a filing cabinet was a Harris PRC 152 handheld. It still had battery power, and more importantly, still had its encryption modules intact. I slipped it into my pack. Even if the repeater didn't work, we might find an active frequency if we got high enough. We topped off the Humvee's tank, loaded what we could into the back, and left the base behind just as the sun dipped below the mountains. The last thing I saw in the side mirror was a C-130 Hercules sitting silent on the runway, its rear ramp down, cargo nets flapping in the wind. No lights, no crew, just the skeleton of what used to be an organized defense. Tucson was darker than any city I'd ever seen. Entire neighborhoods sat in complete silence, power cut, streets empty. Every so often we'd pass signs of chaos, abandoned vehicles still idling, front doors left open, furniture strewn across roads. At a shuttered Circle K, we saw a man banging on the glass from the inside, mouthing words we couldn't hear. He was alone. Desperate. We didn't stop. It took over an hour to reach the edge of Catalina Highway. The road wound steeply north and east through Coronado National Forest, eventually climbing into Mount Lemon's high ridgelines. It was narrow, full of switchbacks and drop-offs, and made worse by recent rock slides. The infected hadn't made it up this far yet, at least not in force. That was our hope: higher elevation, fewer entry points, a place where we could regroup, make contact, and maybe, just maybe, survive the night. About halfway up the mountain, the Humvee's tires started slipping on gravel and snowmelt. The elevation had dropped the temperature sharply, and the thick pines surrounding us made it hard to see more than a dozen feet ahead. We pulled over near a scenic overlook, Windy Point Vista, and got out to recon on foot. The view stretched for miles, the distant lights of Tucson flickering and dying like embers in a campfire. Smoke still rose in several plumes, We saw no aircraft, no signals, no movement below. The repeater station Caldwell mentioned sat another 6 miles up the road, near a fire watch station that had been used sporadically by forest rangers and backcountry SR units. It was reachable only by a dirt path veering off near mile marker 19, which meant hiking the last leg. We stashed the Humvee in a thicket, covered it with brush, and grabbed only what we could carry: radios, weapons, the solar charger, and enough food and water for 24 hours. Then we started walking. The silence of the woods was unnerving. No birds, no insects, just the crunch of boots and the whisper of wind through pine needles. As we moved uphill, the air got thinner, colder. Caldwell led Arkansas, 15 in his arms, eyes constantly scanning the tree line. Miguel followed with a shotgun slung over his shoulder, his pace measured and deliberate. Ellis stuck close to me, still quiet, but alert now. The shock was wearing off, replaced by something harder. Focus, maybe, or just numb survival instinct. It was around 7:30 p.m. when we reached the old repeater station. A squat concrete building, painted forest green, with rusted solar panels along the roof and a steel tower jutting up behind it. The door was locked, but not damaged. No signs of tampering or blood. Caldwell picked it with a multi-tool, while the rest of us watched the dark. When we entered, the inside was freezing cold but intact. Battery backup was offline, but the solar system was still trickle-charging a bank of sealed cells in the corner. The repeater itself was humming quietly, a good sign. I hooked up the Harris radio, connected it to the external antenna, and started scanning. At first, there was nothing but static. Then a crackle, voice modulation, fragmented syllables, then a full sentence. Units regrouping at Peterson, Colorado Springs, airfield compromised, repeat, Peterson compromised. Then silence again, but it was something. Caldwell nodded slowly. If Peterson's out, then Cheyenne Mountain might be fallback. I kept scanning. More fragments came through. Talk of National Guard units overwhelmed near Phoenix. A CDC site lost in Albuquerque. Unconfirmed sightings of infection in Salt Lake City and Denver. The speed of the spread was terrifying. This wasn't just regional. This was full-scale collapse. We stayed there until well after nightfall, using the last daylight to reinforce the building's only door with a steel cabinet and a pair of tool racks. Miguel took first watch. I sat by the radio, sending automated SOS messages on military, emergency, and ham frequencies. Caldwell and Ellis rested, eyes closed but weapons within reach. The station became our lifeboat. Around 10:15 p.m., we got another burst of transmission, clearer this time. A voice calling out from Nellis AFB in Nevada. The base was still holding. Barely. They were receiving refugee convoys from the west and had established a quarantine perimeter. Medical units were trying to isolate early infections. They requested any field agents or federal personnel report if capable. It was the first time I felt anything close to hope since the morning. We responded immediately, identifying ourselves, confirming our coordinates, and asking for extraction or rendezvous protocol. There was no immediate reply. Just static, but it was enough. Someone out there was still fighting, and someone had heard us. The plan shifted. At dawn, we'd leave Mount Lemmon and head northwest. Nellis was 400 miles away through dangerous terrain, but if they were still operational, it might be the last organized stronghold left in the region. We'd take back roads, follow the river routes where possible, avoid cities. It wouldn't be safe, it wouldn't be quick, but it was a direction. As the others settled in for the night, I stepped outside into the cold. The stars above were painfully bright. No light pollution, no hum of civilization, just silence and sky. I thought of my wife last seen in Sierra Vista, of my sister in Phoenix, of all the agents who hadn't made it out of Nogales. Faces flashed in my mind one after the other, until the grief numbed itself into resolve. Tomorrow, we would move again. We had purpose, we had direction, we had a chance. And for the first time in 12 hours, we had something else, a signal. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support keeps these creepypastas coming. Until next time, stay alert, stay safe, and never ignore the feeling that something is watching.